Taxi! Hello and welcome back to another Tactical Doctrine video. In today's video I will show you 5 tricks that you can use with transports that might be the difference of winning or losing. And even if your faction doesn't even have transports, this is something that you still need to be aware of because your opponent might pull them off and I don't want you to be caught off guard. In this video I will show you how to avoid reactive moves, how to be able to surprise and rush your opponent as well as gain massive movement and even more tricks by just using transports. And I will do so with real life 40k miniatures on an actual tabletop. My name is Damien Cooper and welcome to High Stakes 40k, where we are all in on Warhammer. Just last weekend I played at a big tournament, and in round 4 of this tournament I pulled off 2 of the tricks that I'm going to show you today. And to my surprise, my opponent wasn't aware that any of these were possible. So that was actually the difference of me losing or winning. So here I don't want you to be caught off guard if your opponent pulls off some of these tricks. So without further ado, let's start with method number 1. In the first method that I will show you, we will be using the firing deck ability to our advantage. This method is particularly strong when using it with orc trucks because they have a firing deck 12 ability. But I've used it and seen it being used with great success with regular rhinos, for Death Guard, Emperor's Children, or Thousand Sons for example. In our first example, we're going to use the firing deck ability to get a huge movement advantage and get an angle onto our opponent that is usually not possible. Here we have a unit of 10 flash kits that are just standing in the open, and with 6-inch movement there are no valuable targets around, so we can't really shoot anything. But we do have an orc truck that is empty, sitting around 10 to 11 inches away from them. So now what we can do is we can advance our flash kits and end our movement within 3 inches of our orc truck to then embark into it. And here it's worth noticing that we only need to be within 3 inches of our orc truck and not wholly within. So with a 1 or 2 on an advance, we can easily get there. Now we can use the full movement of our truck, which in this case is 12 inches. We can move it up and then we can use the firing deck ability to shoot at our targets. The flash kits advanced and they don't have assault weapons, so they're not eligible to shoot. But we're not shooting with the flash kits per se, but we're shooting with the firing deck ability of the truck, and the truck hasn't advanced. Therefore, it is eligible to still shoot. And here's how the firing deck ability works. We're using the weapons of the flash kits, but the flash kits themselves are not shooting. The truck is, and therefore the truck didn't advance, and we can still shoot. So now our flash kits that only had a 6-inch movement, moved 6, advanced 2 inches, embarked into the truck, then the truck moved 12 inches, and then we can shoot 24 inches away. And this is a huge movement buff, and we can get angles that these flash kits could have never gotten without the truck. In our next example, we're going to make use of the same firing deck ability, but this time we're going to use it with a fallback move. We have a unit of Plague Marines. Unfortunately for us, they are stuck in combat, so we can't shoot with them because they don't have the pistol keyword. We also don't have any access to fallback and shoot, so we can't shoot them at all. But luckily for us, we have an empty rhino sitting around. So now in our movement phase, we can use this rhino, move it within 8 inches of our Plague Marines, so then we can make a 5-inch fallback move. Now all of our Plague Marines are within 3 inches of that rhino, so they can embark into it. Now we can use the firing deck 2 ability of our rhino and shoot our very strong flamers at the Khorne Berserkers we just fell back from. And here we're making use of the exact same firing deck ability, because our Plague Marines are not eligible to fall back and shoot. But since we're not shooting with the Plague Marines, but the rhino is shooting with the guns of the Plague Marines, we are still eligible. And if the rhino would have been within 8 inches of the Plague Marines to begin with, we could have then first fallen back into the rhino, then move the rhino 12 inches and shoot something entirely different. Now let's move on to method number 2, and this is a bit more of an advanced one. I as an orc player, I use this technique all the time, but I've also seen this being used by Thousand Sons or Emperor's Children or basically any other faction that has transports that has more than 1 unit embarked in it. In our first example, we have a truck with 2 units embarked inside of it. A unit of Breaker Boys and a unit of Flash Kits. Our truck is sitting rather in the open, and our opponent, the Space Marine player, has multiple shooting platforms lined up with line of sight onto our truck. They're shooting their Gladiator Lancer at our truck, and it is destroyed. So now we need to disembark our units. The Space Marine player still has multiple shooting units with line of sight to the area where our truck was just destroyed. If we just normally disembark both of our units, then we can basically be sure that all of them will be dead. So here we can use a trick to actually save one of our units. We're going to disembark our flesh kits first, and we will spread them out to the maximum that we can. After we have placed our flesh kits, we make sure that there is not enough room for our breaker boys to also disembark within 3 inches. Now, since there's not enough space for our breaker boys to disembark within 3 inches of the truck, we can perform an emergency disembarkation so that we get 6 inches of disembarkation space. Yes, our unit of breaker boys will have to take mortals on a 1, 2, and 3 instead of just a 1, but that is still much better than our unit just getting shot. And by using the 6-inch disembarkation, we can actually get our entire unit safely behind a wall and thus not get shot from any of the other Space Marine units anymore. Surely we will definitely use our flesh kits now to all of the Space Marine shooting, but half of the units that were lined up to shoot the breaker boys don't have a target anymore. In order to pull off this trick, we need a bit of preparation and in the movement phase, place our truck in a way where we can make sure that we can block ourselves and not have enough movement for our second unit to safely disembark within 3 inches. And by doing so, we can block the space with our own models behind a wall, or we can just angle the truck in a way next to a terrain piece where we can't disembark our unit. This is a trick that doesn't always work, but when it works, it can actually make a huge difference by saving a full 200+ point unit instead of just having them die out in the open. There's also a second version of this trick where we can use this to steal objectives, and that is exactly what I did in my last tournament. In our next example, we are playing against World Eaters, and we do have a truck that is in the vicinity of an objective marker. The World Eater player only has 2 Chaos Spawn sitting on that objective marker. They will then charge our truck with 3 Exalted 8-bound and destroy it. Now we can use the exact same method that we used before, but this time we will disembark the breaker boys first. And we will do so in a way that our 5 flesh kits do not have enough room to also disembark within 3 inches. So now we can use the 6-inch disembarkation on our flesh kits to get all of our flesh kits on the objective in the middle. Again, we will be taking mortals on a 1, 2, 3 instead of just a 1, but this is definitely worth it. Because even if we roll all 1s, we will only lose 2 flesh kits, as our flesh kits are 2 wounds per model. Meaning at the bare minimum, we will still be left with 3 flesh kits that are now sitting on an objective. Of course, in our opponent's turn, the flesh kits will be battle shocked and they can't hold that objective. But when our turn comes around, they will unbattle shock, and therefore we will have 3 OC to our opponent's 2 OC on the point, and thus score primary here that we wouldn't have been able to before. Here it's worth noticing that we need to disembark the breaker boys so that they are the closer target to the Exalted 8-bound, so that they can consolidate back onto the point or into our flesh kits. Here they have to consolidate into the breaker boys, which they obviously don't want because the breaker boys would just kill all of the 8-bound. And if you need to brush up on how consolidation works, then worry not, because I just made a video about this and I will link it up here. So here, by having 2 units, which is usually one very expensive one and one cheap one, we can control the disembarkation and where our units will end up. And that can either save the more expensive unit or actually get us to score points. Next up, we have what I used to call the taxi method. Here we're going to use our transports to gain extra movement. In our next example, we're playing a search and destroy deployment. Here our natural expansion objective marker, which is the objective marker that is the closest to our deployment zone and therefore the easiest to get to and also the easiest to defend, is still quite far away because of how search and destroy works. Here we want a unit of Gretchen to be on that objective marker turn 1. But with 6-inch movement, we need a very high advance to actually get there and get all of our Gretchen in safety. So here what we will do, we will embark the Gretchen inside of a truck. That truck is also within line of sight of potential shooting lanes, which unfortunately we can't do anything about. Then safely tucked behind a wall, we have a unit of 10 flesh kits. Now when our turn comes around, we will disembark the Gretchen, throw an advance, and then easily get behind the wall because we get an extra 3 inch of movement by disembarking the Gretchen from the transport first. Now we can take our flash kits, embark in the truck, and then move the truck to safety. Another way we can use the taxi strategy is to have one unit embarked, that unit disembarks, maybe goes out and charges something, and then we will load the same transport with a different unit and move the transport into a nice staging position. This way we don't have to spend the points on dedicated transports for all of our units, and we can basically use one transport for 2 units. By having one unit embarked within it to start the game, then disembarking them and get into a nice position with the extra 3 inch movement, and then take a second unit, embark them, and move the Rhino. Now let's talk about trick number 3. And this should be a very obvious one, but a lot of times people don't actually have this on their radar. With this method, our opponent might get an angle onto our units that we weren't aware of. If you've watched my how to deploy video, you know how to determine shooting lanes and how to pre-measure your opponent's units as well as tanks and know exactly where they can go and what kind of angles they can get. But what people often forget is that we can use a transport up against a wall and then disembark an infantry unit on the other side of that wall. So here in our example, we are playing Search and Destroy again. And we are the Death Guard player and we have a Rhino with 10 Plague Marines embarked in it. So now if we, the Death Guard player, start, we can use our Rhino, move it 12 inches against a wall, then disembark our entire unit on the other side of the wall. And if there's not enough space on the other side of the wall, we can actually utilize the first floor and disembark our unit in the first floor as well to make sure that all of our 12 models have enough space. And here our Plague Marines now have line of sight into almost the entire deployment zone of our opponent. Now we can use our Plague Marines to shoot a very valuable unit, and furthermore, once their turn comes around, as soon as anything moves in their deployment zone, we can actually use the Overwatch stratagem and potentially kill a second unit. So here you need to be aware of your opponent being able to move their transports, disembark their shooting infantry units, potentially even into the first floor, and then getting angles that you weren't aware of in the beginning. Here one way we can avoid this is by taking infiltrators and lining them up behind the wall, so that our opponent doesn't have the space to actually disembark their units. And finally, let's move on to trick number 5 when you're playing transports or even when you're playing against transports. Here we will utilize reactive moves. A lot of people are not aware that a reactive move is most of the times a normal move. And with a normal move, we can actually embark into a transport. In the following scenario, I'm going to show you a trick that I used to do all the time when I was playing Tactical Brigade. But this is something that any unit can do that has access to a reactive move. In our example, I have a unit of Beast Naggers with a Beast Boss embarked in a truck. On my war turn, I'm going to disembark, advance the unit of Beast Naggers, go out and kill a Death Guard drone. Then after killing the drone, I will have my unit of Beast Naggers consolidate into a second Death Guard drone. Still in my movement place, I will take the truck that the unit just disembarked from and place it nicely hidden behind a wall, but still within 9 inches of the Beast Naggers. Now in our opponent's turn, the opponent can shoot the Beast Naggers because they are still engaged with the drone and the drone itself only has blast weapons. So now in order to be able to shoot the Beast Naggers, they need to fall back from them. But in Tactical Brigade, I do have a reactive move that I can use once a unit falls back from any of my own units. So as soon as the drone falls back, I will trigger that reactive move and embark back in the transport that sits safely behind a wall in the truck, can't be shot, so next turn I can disembark again and charge another thing. And this is something you need to be aware of, because there is a lot of units in this game that have reactive moves, like Templars, the new Victrix Honor Guard, so they can disembark from a transport, kill something in combat, and once you go within 9 inches of them, they will just trigger the reactive move and embark back into the transport that might even be sitting safely behind a wall outside of line of sight. And speaking of reactive moves, here's another bonus trick. We have all played against annoying units that always trigger a reactive move once you get within 9 inches of them and then they just move away. The Space Marine Combi Lieutenant comes to mind. Here we can use our transport to avoid triggering that reactive move by moving the transport just outside of 9 inches of that opponent's unit and then disembark our unit within 3 inches of it. disembarking a unit after our transport has made a normal move counts as making a normal move, but it is not a normal move. And therefore the positioning of our models doesn't trigger the reactive move of the unit, even though we now have a unit within 6 inches of that enemy unit. So this way we can get our unit on an objective marker without triggering the reactive move. So this way we can just steal an objective, or we can just use a shooty infantry unit and just shoot the target without them being able to safely get behind cover. Or if our transport has the assault ramp ability, then we can actually just stop outside of 9 inches, disembark our unit, and still get a nice and easy 6-inch charge into them. So there you have it. These were 5 tricks that you can use when playing transports, or you need to be aware of when playing against transports, because some of them can be really powerful and might catch you or your opponent off guard. As always, at the end of the videos, I would like to extend a big thank you to all the YouTube and Patreon members for supporting this channel and making it possible for me to create more of these high quality tactic videos and possibly even better reports and more reviews and tier lists in the future. And if you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up because it really helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more videos. My name is Damien Cooper, and here on High Stakes 40K, we are all in on Warhammer.